Thanks everybody for joining today for this month's ShoreTel Enterprise Contact Center Admin Training. If somebody can respond to the question just to verify that you guys can hear me talking today, we'll get started. Awesome, there we go. All right, well, this month we're going to be doing our first Enterprise Contact Center Admin Training. We've done a lot of UC or PBX admin training. We're going to start mixing in some Enterprise Contact Center since we have a lot of ShoreTel ECC customers. So today we have with us, I'm Chris Mitchell, Chief Operating Officer with Inflow Communications. I've been doing ShoreTel installing, supporting for about 11 years. I think August, I'm almost at the 11-year mark. I think August hits 11 years. So in that time, I've went from installing the first ShoreTel with Inflow to now we have 17 people on the engineering and project management side just installing and supporting ShoreTel. So also along with us today, we have another Chris Riccio. He's our Director of Contact Center and Advanced Applications. He comes with over 20 years of contact center experience. Most recently, he spent 4 years with ShoreTel, helping run their contact center practice. So we're really excited to have him on board, and and helping us out with our contact center admin training. So for any of you who aren't familiar with Inflow Communications, I'll kind of give you a few minutes description of who is Inflow Communications, and then we'll turn the time over to Chris Riccio, and he'll dive into our contact center training. So who is Inflow Communications? We're 2 years in a row, we're one of Oregon's fastest growing private businesses. For 2015, we're ShoreTel's Contact Center Partner of the Year. So over all of their 800 or 900 partners worldwide, we were ranked #1 on the contact center side. They just finished doing rankings for 2015 for their Circle of Excellence for their top partners in the U.S. We ranked #3, which we're really excited to break into the top 10 and be ranked #3 this year. As we continue to grow, we now support over 70,000 ShoreTel endpoints with 400 customers worldwide. We support customers in all over the world with live call centers, 24/7 call centers, hospitals, different types of customers. So as we're continuing to grow, we've also grown our footprint from just being an Oregon-based company 6 or 7 years ago to now having offices and employees in Oregon, Washington, California, Texas. We also have admin staff in Colorado and South Carolina. So we have sales and engineering staff in those other states. So as we've kind of grown, we're over 25 employees. I think we're really close to 30 employees now. So as we're continuing to grow and just be laser focused on ShoreTel and contact centers, it's helped us a lot to grow. On the bottom, you'll see some of the different customers that we work with on supporting their system. We either installed or now supporting their phone system. So if you have questions, feel free to reach out to us about any other questions you have about Inflow Communications, and I will turn the time over to Chris Riccio to begin our training.
Great. Thanks for the quick intro, Chris, and thank you all for making time today to be available for this training. As Chris stated, I did come from ShoreTel. I was with ShoreTel 3.5 years, and I was the contact center specialist on the West Coast. So I interfaced with quite a few partners and customers. I've done contact center for about 20 years, and one of the things that I like about contact center is that it tends to be a very fast-paced, moving, dynamic environment. So what I've learned through that process is that a lot of times from the administration point of view, understanding how the pieces fit together will help you provide more flexibility for the contact center users. So today we're going to cover specifically database connectivity within ShoreTel's Enterprise Contact Center, connecting to third-party databases. Now, one of the things that I look for in contact center solutions is where are my flexible options and points. And one of the biggest opportunities that happens these days, and everyone has likely heard the analogy of big data. Data has been around for quite some time, and having native ODBC connectivity makes your life so much easier and gives you lots more flexible options. Going back 20 years ago, I used to play with data then, and I even play with data more today. If you have any questions as I go through the presentation, we will be stopping to address different points where there may be some questions. Feel free to ask any questions that you like. If we don't have an answer today, we'll definitely follow up and get an answer to you directly. So let's get into native ODBC configuration today. We have a basic agenda. We're going to cover the prerequisites for establishing your ODBC connectors. We're going to walk through making the actual connection. And then I'm going to show you how to use the connection, because once you've made the connection, it's just a connection until you actually use it. Now the next piece I want to talk about will be call profiles. Call profiles, you can think of them as labels. If you're a programmer, you can think of them as globals or variables. But a call profile in its most simplistic form is a label. We're going to cover what is a call profile. I'm going to show you how to create call profiles. And then we're going to talk about putting those call profiles to work in real case scenarios. Now what I'm going to do is give you an overview with print screen so you can actually see how to make the connection and how to configure the options. Then I'm going to actually get into the live system and do the connections for you live. That way you have, you'll notice on your right hand side in the box there is a handout that you're welcome to download which walks you through the steps, so you have a visual cue, but I'm going to walk you through that in real time as well. So one of the reasons that I like playing with data is because it creates endless possibilities. In the contact center, the possibilities for dynamic control are so much different today than they were in the past. That'll make more sense in a moment, but let me give you quick examples here. How can data be used in the contact center? That's really the crux of this overview. And how data is used can be leveraged in many ways. So I have two examples for you. At its simplistic form, we can look at a call coming in, looking at caller ID, and this is the best way to grab information transparently. When I look at the caller ID, I can take the IVR process, which is built into Enterprise Contact Center. ShoreTel does a very good job of providing our IVR process within the same server. We use the IVR to then reach out to the database. Now, when I talk about a database, you can refer to it as a CRM, a web service, or a BI, business intelligence application. A lot of contact centers these days are doing heavy analytics, but underneath the CRM, those applications is what I consider the holy grail of access, which is the database. Now in this here, this caller ID comes in, the system through IVR will connect to the database, and in my example, I'm grabbing an account balance. When I grab this information from the database, I'm going to push this into the system as a call profile, but you can think of it as a label. The important piece here is that when the call comes in, I'm going to attach to the database, grab something very specific about the customer that's calling, and because I have this information that they call thread, I can use it to do quick logic. In this case, the IVR can be presented with a quick question, hey, is the account balance over $500? If the answer is yes, let's send the call to financial services. If the answer is no, let's send the call to customer service. I give this example because most everyone has customers they deal with that are at some level of delinquency, or they may have some invoices that are present and due. In my example here, take the account balance, which you can see there is $569.12. Replace that with any data that is critical in your individual environment. Now, contact centers are notorious for having multiple groups, multiple service units. So the information that may be a key driver in terms of dynamically treating that call depends on the group. Let's look at another example. This one was about money. The next example is about the customer type. Going back to our example, let's say this customer calls in with this caller ID. ECC intercepts the call on the IVR. More specifically, we'll take the caller ID and find out the database or the CRM. What type of customer are we dealing with today? In this case, the customer type is a VIP customer. Now, in most environments, VIP customers either have earned that status through a consistent partnering with you and purchasing products and services. It may be a certain class of customer. But in this case, we could have the IVR present a very different question. Is this a VIP customer? If the answer is yes, let's send it to special services with high priority. If the answer is no, let's go to general customer service with no priority. Now, there are plenty of other examples which we'll get to in just a moment, but keep in mind here, the key driver here is that you have information, and in every contact center, there's information available to you that could be leveraged to make a dynamic decision with regard to the call. We're going to get into those examples in just a moment, but let's get into the crux here, what we're really focused on today, which is native ODBC. And there are some prerequisites in terms of establishing the connector, and some that are not written in a manual anywhere. I'm going to point these out. Oftentimes when it comes to products, there are nuances of the product that you discover through the process, but is not necessarily written in the manual. We'll disclose a couple of those today. Number one, Enterprise Contact Center contains native support for third-party database, commonly known as ODBC, or Open Database Connectivity. There are prerequisites for making this connection. The first is that you must establish a system DSN. It must be configured on the server. In other words, we need to have the appropriate drivers on the ECC server that can communicate with that external database. Now, generally, you would see your IT administrator for direction on this. There may be some permissions that need to be applied. And as far as access to the database, it is not required. It is not required to be on the ECC server natively. It can be anywhere in your network or anywhere in the customer network. So your IT administrator likely would have some information for you in that regard. Next, once you've established the DSN, and I'm going to show this to you in just a moment for those of you that are not familiar with this, I'm going to walk you through that process. But once you've established the DSN has been configured on the ECC server, you can move to the next step. Now, the next step is going to require that you have appropriate administrator account on the ECC server, where you intend to configure the ODBC connectivity. Again, your administrator should give you direction on that. Let's talk about adding the actual database resource on the system. For those of you that are on the call that are familiar with adding a resource, normally you would look at your server and you would go into Control Panel to add this resource, and you would select the database sources under Services. However, this is one of those unwritten rules that is nowhere documented. Rather than going through Control Panel, I strongly recommend that you actually go into the system EXE, and you'll notice up in the upper part of this slide deck, you'll see that I'm going into the Windows SysWow 64 directory. I'm actually looking for the executable, which is the ODBC AD32. I'm going to right-click on this and run it as administrator. In the past, I have seen clients use Control Panel natively, which is the most place that clients go to. However, I've seen user permissions come up on the network or on the server in that regard. In this case, if you go to the executable directly, run it as an administrator, you alleviate some of those issues that does have found in the past. So make sure you're looking at this. Next, once you have access and have installed the data service, you're going to go into the system DSN and create your connection. You have to create the system DSN that actually points to the actual database you're trying to reach. In my example here, I have a SQL Server Express installed on a server, and that's where I'm pointed. You would configure the connection as usual, and always test your connection before proceeding. If you get a failure at this point, you'll need to work with your IT administrators to ensure that you have the proper user permission and success rate to administer the connection. Once you've added the DSN, this is an important piece, and this is an often asked question. Do I need to restart the server? So the answer is no, you do not need to restart the ECC server. However, you will restart the service, and you find that under Services, under Control Panel, and go to Administrative Tools and Services. You will look for the ShoreTel Contact Center service and restart the service. Now, 30 to 40 seconds once you've established the DSN. The reason you need to restart the service is so that ECC can then recognize there's a new connection available to itself on the server. Now, I don't recommend you restarting the services during an operational window, especially if you're a busy contact center facility. You might want to schedule that in an after hours, before hours type of scenario, so you're not impacting the floor. That being said, I've had some clients do it quickly on the floor without really impacting their operation, but that's not the recommended way to proceed. I do recommend you schedule this restart of the service after hours or before hours. Now, once we have the connections inside ShoreTel, inside the Contact Center Director, there are quite a bit of native built-in processors that you can connect to. This is a quick drop-down. You'll notice here that you can connect MS SQL, MS Access, MySQL, Oracle, Sybase, DB2, and going old school to Informix. You'll notice at the top there in the middle where it says timeout, there's also others. So I have seen folks connect natively to Linux environments as well. It's all about putting the appropriate driver onto the server itself. And again, if there is a driver that's necessary that you don't see in the drop down here, then you would fall under other and work with your IT administrator. That being said, all in all, when I do establish the original connection, once the driver has been installed, you might spend about 20 minutes total, but once we get the driver installed, it's about 20 seconds to create an actual connection in ECC, and that's what we're going to be showing you today. Now, many client applications, this is the key why I leverage, and for any of you that have seen my presentations before, I talk a lot about data. And that's because most contact center facilities are reliant upon a CRM, whether the CRM is Salesforce, Microsoft Dynamics, or maybe it's a homegrown application. It's all going to reside on a database. And this really is the crux of gaining true dynamic capabilities in terms of how you route calls, how you treat calls. So just keep in mind, when I say CRM, I'm really referring to the database underneath. Most folks that are not database savvy, they'll think of it as CRM. The main driver here is that once you have access to the database, it really opens up your options for access for clients and dynamic treatment in the contact center. We'll have some examples in a moment. So let's get into the native ODBC, establishing a connection within ECC. It's actually quite simple. ShoreTel has done a great job with ECC in creating a very simple, what I like to call point and click your way to happiness sort of functionality. The first step you're going to do is you're going to launch ShoreTel Contact Center Director. You're going to enter your username and password. Obviously, if you don't have a username and password, you're going to work with your administrator. And oftentimes, administrators will not give you access to this, but if we have administrators on the call, you would basically have your username and password as defined in ECC. Once you've navigated and added in username and password, you will be inside ECC Director. And one of the things that ShoreTel has gotten very right is in the upper left-hand corner, where right under the word ShoreTel, there is a quick inline search window. So if you've never been in ECC before, type in what you're looking for. It will take you directly to those options within ECC Director, so it's easy to navigate. In this case, I've typed in database in the upper left-hand corner, and I've navigated down to system parameters. Excuse me. And once I highlight it on database connections, you'll see on the right in the center of the screen, I've got several connections. One starts with appointment reminder CC, the next one is appointment reminder CR, etc. But the navigation is very easy and intuitive. Once I get to that point, in order to make a new connection in the upper right-hand corner, and this is what I like best about ShoreTel's Contact Center, is the way you process things is very similar. In other words, if you're adding an agent, if you're adding a group, if you're adding an IRN, you do it in the same way. And that doesn't change for adding database connectivity as well. You'll notice to create a new connection in the upper right-hand corner, you hit your new button. Down below, you will be presented with a generic name of the new connection. Change the name to something logical. Logical is actually better because if you know it's a customer table and it's from Salesforce, you might put Salesforce customers, something that lets you know and anyone else that may come up behind you to administer the system, they know exactly what they're looking at. So I recommend giving a logical name. You'll also notice on the lower left-hand corner that where the blue arrow is, you're also going to enter your username and password. I do recommend that you have user and password logged in here. And you'll notice there's also a listing for simultaneous connections. Now, one of the questions that comes up frequently is how many connections do I actually need? To give you an example, each connection can handle about 6,000 calls per month. I've rarely come across clients that actually needed more than 2 or 3 connections, but if you're concerned about connectivity, you can certainly change that up to 10 simultaneous connections, knowing that one connection can support about 6,000 calls per month. So give it a logical name. It's pretty easy to set up. Once you've set the name and you've changed it, you're going to select next the type of database connection. Now, this example shows MS Access, but in your case, you're going to select whichever database you're going to be accessing to. Now, your DSNs are going to show up here. So previously, if I've installed SQL Express, that would be a drop-down as well. I'd be able to see which I'm pointing to. Now, enter your username and password, your simultaneous connection is covered, and on the right-hand side, you're going to hit the Create button. It's as simple as that. It goes fairly quickly, and once you've established that connection, you'll see on the top side there, highlighted in light blue, is my connection, which I kept as change name. Now, once you have the connection there, you're free to do with it what you need. Now, once you have the connection, there's actually more work to do, but the connection itself is pretty straightforward. Now, let's switch our topic and focus to using the connection. Now, as I mentioned a moment ago, once I have the connection, it's just sitting there waiting for me to utilize it. The next piece is fairly important because it's going to allow you to relate the database and pull in some information into ECC so that you can leverage it within scripting. So using the connection, after configuring the database connection, you're going to want to then associate it with IVR scripting. We're not going to go heavily into IVR. What I will show you in IVR is how you connect to a database. I'll give you a couple of examples, and then at a later discussion presentation, we'll go into IVR at a deeper level. But for the purposes of this overview, database connectivity and IVR go hand in hand. They work together. And what you will initially do is you'll make the connection, you'll then request the data, and then always close the connection once you've received your data, and then take action. So it's a four-step process usually. Oftentimes you can build very extensive logic. We're going to talk about that in a moment, but simplistically we're going to make the connection, request the data from the database, close our connection, and then take action. When we take action, we're actually evaluating the information we received from the database in order to proceed. So when you look at ODBC connections, it gives you access to caller data. That's one way of using it. Now, call profiles are going to be used to store this information. Within scripting, you will add the specific information into a call profile. So that leads us to our next topic, which is what is a call profile? When we request data from the database, we need a temporary storage place to store the information. In a database, you have a field of information. It might be a customer's account number. But just knowing that we're connected to it, we need to store it somewhere in ECC so that it becomes part of the living, breathing call. And we store that in what's known as a call profile. Now, a call profile you can think of as a field of data or a label. A label is the easiest way to think of a call profile. So let's talk about call profiles, creating call profiles, and putting call profiles to work. So after establishing a connection, you're going to want to create call profiles that make sense to you. So for example, if you're looking at a customer's caller ID and you'd like to extract their account number, it would be a good idea for you to create a call profile called account number, something logical, or customer name if that's the information you're after. There's really no limit as to what you call the call profile. So then again, make it logical so that it makes sense to you and it makes sense to the viewer. When a call is received, we may want to use the customer's caller ID to look up the information, but you can also prompt the client for entry. So if you want to ask them for their account number, they can key in their digits. With the caller ID, we use that transparently without having to involve the customer. If we don't find a match or we find multiple records for that same caller ID, then you may prompt them to enter the account number to associate the record. So it's really up to you to decide what's the best for your customer and the best for your environment. Customers can also be prompted with their input, and once they have the input, then we can match it to the record and pull up lots of information. We use the ODBC connection to ask the database for the information about the caller's account. And this can be anything in the database. Here's what I say about the database. Once I'm connected to the database, it becomes fair game to use anything in the database to make a logical decision as to what to do with the call. And when we do look at information, we store it in a call profile. Call profiles are used to store the data, and they stay with the call during the duration of the call. So if I intercept a call, I get the customer's account number and balance, and that call gets transferred to 3 or 4 agents. That data is persistent with that call until the customer hangs up. So there's no need for the next agent or the next agent or even the supervisor to have to ask them for this specific information. It happens once and it stays with the call. So in terms of what is a call profile, The call profile is simply a field of data. You can think of it as a label. I'm going to get into labels in a moment, and I'll give you an example of how, instead of using the call profile for database-specific information, I might use it as a label. But the call profiles are created in Contact Center Director. They're very easy. There is no limit to the call profiles. That being said, most clients would never need more than a couple hundred call profiles. Once you get beyond the hundreds, then you're probably looking at streamlining it down either through some other protracted database. From a limited point of view, we'll just tell about call profiles. There is no limitation to you. Most clients I work with, I use the call profiles for various things. It can be an insurance ID if you're an insurance company. It can be a ticket ID if you're administering a help desk ticket. It can be a customer name, account balance. Anything you can think of that's important to you is what you can call your call profile. It's a free-form field. It's probably one of the best things that's available in the contact center is the ability to name these based on my specific need and not based on what somebody else thought I would need. So to get to call profile, when you're inside Contact Center Director, you will go in the upper left-hand corner again and just type in call profile. You'll see down below on the left-hand side where it says system parameters, the blue arrows point to call profiles, and in the center of the screen you'll see many call profiles. It's starting at the top with account balance, account number. You'll notice a loop counter I'll talk about in a minute, but there's lots of ways that you can slice this and utilize the call profile. And as I mentioned before, the process for creating a call profile and many things that you can see is the same. In the upper right-hand corner, you're going to select New. The system will automatically generate the new one with a generic name. And you'll notice down below, this one has the name give name. So you can whatever name makes sense to you. Now, I do have a sort of a guideline here. As with all things related to contact center or telephony, numbering and naming plan might help you catalog how things are related to each other. For example, if this is account information, I might start all with account balance, account name, account number, account delinquency. So I always like to group my call profiles in like groups so that they make sense. If I were doing a survey, I might do my survey too, things like that. But it's up to you to decide. Coming from a telecom background, I always like to think logically and I strategize how I name these, but that's up to you. They can be anything you wish. That's just my helpful hint. Once I've created the call profile, let's back up on the right-hand side here. I hit the Create button, so it looks very familiar. And then I'll have my new call profile, and you'll see at the top here, highlighted in blue, give name. So it's ready for use. So let's put a call to work. Let's talk a little bit about them. The primarily call profiles are used to store database information. However, they have very many uses. Think of a call profile as a bucket or a label. And the way you can use them is, skipping down the bullets at the bottom here, is from a real-time point of view, I can use call profiles to make an on-the-fly routing decision in IVR. And this is actually the most valuable piece of the puzzle. Let me give you an example. If I have a customer that's calling in, and I see that in their database somewhere it's flagged that they're a Spanish speaker, rather than give them a menu option that says, thank you for calling, if you'd like your assistance in Spanish, press 2, I already have this information available to me. This is one of the decisions that you can make on the fly to automatically recognize this person speaks Spanish, let's greet them with the Spanish menu, flag the call with a Spanish skill, and automatically send them to someone that's going to greet them in Spanish. It's a little bit more effort to think about that, but when you think about customer loyalty and branding experience, these are one of the ways that you can gain a little more control over it. So making on-the-fly routing decisions is the key reason we would want to connect to a database and utilize our call profile. We also use the call profile for presenting data to applications. So this means a screen pop. And when we look up information in a database, we only need to look it up once. Here's the example. If Mary Jones calls in, I use her caller ID and grab her account number. That attaches to the call. When my agent answers the call, I automatically share that account number with the application, the screen pops, so we actually bring up Mary Jones' account for the agent. So when we do a database lookup, we use it for many things. One of them is to do the screen pop and share information with the application. The next way we use call profiles is to present data or labels to agents to help them do their job better. I'm going to give you an example in a moment. This is really helpful in a small contact center, where a small contact center, which has limited numbers of agents, might have 3 or 4 lines of business, that need to use labels to help them answer the call. And that'll come up in an example in a moment. And lastly, we use the call profiles to enhance customer service. The example could be, on the fly, if I see I've got a VIP customer, let's automatically greet them with a celebrity announcement. This is pretty much done with anyone like at St. Jude's who is a customer of mine, or any of the major ball leagues. They might have one of their ball players give their VIP clients a special treat by greeting them with a celebrity endorsement or a celebrity greeting. We can also use it to change the priority of that caller on the fly, change their position in the queue, lots of different things that we can do. So when you're talking about building your customer loyalty and branding experience for your customers, call profile is one of the best ways for you to gain control of that. So let's look here. Here are some examples of call profiles in use. Setting call priorities, playing different on-hold music for different types of callers. So if you're in the let's say you're in the mortgage loan services, someone that might be subprime or has ranks lower on the FICO scoring matrix might have a different recording than someone who's higher than that. You can play different on-hold announcements as well for marketing purposes or for strategy against marketing. If I see that the call has been flagged as a VIP customer while they're waiting in queue for their account executive, I could play them VIP messaging or different types of announcements related just to VIP clients. I can use it for making dynamic routing decisions we just talked about. I can also use it for playing different menu options. Again, the example I gave was playing Spanish to a native Spanish speaker that we already have that information in our database. Playing different language prompts. This is just a small list of how you can use call profiles. Let's give you an example of labels, because I talked about labels, and I'm going to walk you through a scenario that I configured for a client that had 10 agents, but they supported multiple medical facilities, and they also supported members as well as practitioners for the physicians. So here's what their menu looked like. Thank you for calling. If you're a provider, press 1. If you're a member, press 2. Or if you're something else, press 3. When that individual selected option 2 because they're a member, a label was created using a call profile, which ultimately is going to show the rep that this is a member calling in. Then the member was given the next option. Thank you. If you're calling about Blue Shield, press 1, Medicare, press 2, Medicaid, press 3. When the caller selected Medicare, the call was flagged with a label using a call profile. Now I can see that I have a member for Medicare on the call, and when the call was sent to the next destination, thank you. Are you calling about an appointment? Are you calling about claims or pharmacy? And as I suspect, when this individual selected pharmacy, the call is now flagged as member, Medicare, and pharmacy, and this completely changed what the agent needed to do. Because this facility had members and multiple service providers, it was very important for the users to know exactly who they're speaking with so they know how to greet the call. This information is shared at the desktop with the agent, how they can answer the call. Thank you for calling Medicare. If you're calling for the pharmacy, how can I help you? They can go right into their qualification. So while this is not about using a call profile for a database lookup, it's about using a call profile to label the call. Now I'll give you one more piece of information. I'm going to share exactly how to configure these options. Call profiles can also be used as part of reporting, especially cradle-to-grave reporting. Call profiles fundamentally change how you report on information. So for example, most contact centers are very focused on how many calls did I receive today? What's my answer rate? What was the outcome? But more and more, because contact centers are becoming more and more database driven, it's more than likely a client, especially this client, how many calls did I get for Medicare that called about the pharmacy? How many clients did I get that called for appointments in Medicaid? It lets you get very specific. So not only do call profiles drive the opportunity or drive the call in the IVR, it allows me to label the calls as well, and all the call profiles can be stuffed into cradle-to-grave reporting, so now I get deeper analytics in the contact center. So it does really give you quite a bit of opportunity for analytics and driving the contact center. Before I get to the live demo, Chris, are there any questions about anything we've discussed so far?
I don't see any questions, so maybe they're just overwhelmed. But I would say, unless we see any questions, I say let's move on to the live demo.
Great. And for the callers on the call here, if you're overwhelmed or shy, I'm happy to address and work with you one-on-one. If you have any questions, it is quite a bit of information, but let's go ahead and skip out of here. And I'm going to go into a live system. So let me get into my system here. We're going to do a couple of things first. Now, I'm going to, while this is queuing up here, I'm going to, trying to talk and type at the same time on a laptop. I'm going to connect here, and we're going to walk into a couple of things. But let's hit a couple of points first. What I mentioned on the onset is when you're adding your database connection and you need to add your driver and DSN, I do not recommend going to Control Panel, because this is not going to, and then going to Administrative Services and then ODBC Connections. Because I've seen issues with permissions, and this is nowhere documented, my recommendation is to actually go into the Windows directory, go into here, and then look for the ODBC connection, and it should be right about here, and right-click, Run as Administrator. This will save you a lot of access levels, and if you do run it as administrator, you will get a deeper level set in terms of that. So remember that key, because it's not a good help. Now, I log director, and if I'm looking from database here, you'll see on the left-hand side to database, and database connection. It's simply go over the top of the way. You'll notice database connection, Express, and I'm going to have one. And then you'll notice your DSN, there's my SQL Express service connection that I would be establishing too, and then I'm going to give it my option for SQL. Now, interestingly, you can go ahead and use MS SQL for this, because that is a Microsoft product. I'm going to use my username. I'm just going to hit connect or create on the right-hand side. Now, the next step is I'm going to use the call profile. Let's type in call profile. Fill this down. I can go right to call profiles down below. And you'll see this is my list of all my call profiles that I currently have. If I need to create a new call profile, simply go to the upper right-hand corner, select New, and you'll notice down below I'm going to get the next sequential. So here I'm going to say Ticket ID, since we are a help desk, and sometimes I like to space these out so I can see it. Ticket ID, and once I hit Create, I have my Ticket ID now ready and available for use. If I want to create one more, I just select New, give it any name you want. Any name, we'll call it 1, and it's completely we'll prefer to call it. Now, once those are established, now I'll be able to use those inside of a script. So I'm going to jump gears here. I'm going to log into GCCS Scripting, and we're going to show you how you make the connection and how you leverage it inside scripting. So here I'm going to launch my scripting. I'll log in here. Let's do that there. I look like I had a typo there. Now, once I'm logged in, if you're not familiar with scripting, we'll cover scripting in another session, but really what I want to focus on is getting right to the database connectivity. You'll notice here on you can then query the database and extract information. In the background on the left-hand side is you have your various tools. There are a couple of options down here on the left side: SQL Connect, SQL Disconnect, SQL Execute. Most of the other, there's very go and create something brand new using the database connection we just created. If I go to this file that's here, hit New, I'm going to get their next script name. This is script 367. I'm not going to change it. That's what's about to the menu. The IVR is a menu. Thank you for calling. Please use this Get Digits icon right here. Once I get the digits, I'm going to need a database connect. I'm going to grab SQL Connect right next to the center at the last row. Will execute. Then I'm going to close my disk, And the fun part is right here in the center on the left. I'm going to grab the logic switch because this is how I'm going to evaluate the condition. I'm going to just string these together. Very quick details until we get to the database. Look at each of these icons, and the call profiles are used for database information, but also storing anything for details in your greeting. Thank you for calling Inflow Communications. The next icon here will allow me to insert into CP value. This CP is short for call profile. So if we're asking the customer for their account number, I can put that in number. Your digits are below. So number of 6 digits, I'll put in 6. Here I have a pound or star to signify. Need that if you only have 6 digits, you can just leave it at 6. The system. The next piece is the critical piece because we're going to use that information to connect the database. This icon will just created. Now that I'm connecting that database, I'm going to go into the database here, and I'm going to write a select statement. Now, let's do select everything from my table where customer equals percent account number. Let me explain what I just did there. I want the select statement. I surround it with percent signs. So whatever name you've given it will allow me to extract it from the database. Now down below here, you see right here where I've highlighted where it says CP field, and then column name. Identify the information, and I'm going to store it in the call. You see lots of things here. So if I want name, these are just simple examples. And then what I'm going to do is associate this with the database table. I can find account balance in a column in my database called balance. I can find the business name in my database called client. This is how you make the association. But what's really important here is I can update these call profiles on the fly here based on my needs. Now, once I've established that I've got my query, I've aligned my call profiles with my columns in my database down below, then I would go to my database connect at the top. I would then disconnect my database. Then this is the actual fun part. At the very end here, this is that logic switch. And go to $100, since that's the example I used in my first slide earlier. Then follow whatever happens at pathway 1. Now, right now, I don't have anything at pathway 1 at the top, but I can certainly decide what I want to do with that. As an example, I could transfer it to a specific destination. So here's a transfer icon. And in that case, maybe I transfer it to financial services because they're over $500 balance. And then you can see here if it's less than, greater than, or something else. You just decide what your parameters are. Let's do 499. And then make the next destination. So you can see how call profiles factor in here. Now, this is just the tip of the iceberg with regard to call profiles. You can certainly change things up. Let me give you an example. On the upper left-hand corner, I'm going to grab this change call profile field right here, this value. Let's say this call comes through. I decide it's over $500. I transfer it to a destination, but before I transfer it, maybe I want to change the call profile information, a specific piece. Perhaps it's, and you see that I've got this highlighted, before I actually transfer to that destination, I highlight the call profile, I take the value, it could be something like priority, change the priority because it's a VIP customer to 100. So you can see here the call profiles give you lots of flexibility. You can use them for database storage. You can use them to do labeling. There's different ways you can use call profiles. So with that said, we have about 14 minutes left. I wanted to leave enough time for Q&A. Chris, do we have any questions?
I don't see any questions. Actually, we just have one. It says, I would like to pull data from the ShoreTel database into our data warehouse. Will there be a training for this direction?
So I'll caveat it with this. When you're talking about the ShoreTel database, I presume you're talking about the ECC database. Is that correct?
See if I can unmute. Or can. All right. So here's Larkin, you're unmuted also, so you can talk to Chris.
So you asked a question about the database. You're talking about the ECC database, correct? So here's what I'll do. I'll answer the question this way. Yes, you can pull and extract information from the database. As far as having a specific session on it, here's the slippery slope with any vendor. For ShoreTel specifically, the ECC tables, the raw tables, while you can gain access to the database, ShoreTel does not share any relationship or relational information regarding the database. You won't get the schema, and the schema is subject to change without notification. But the short answer is yes, you can grab the information. Whether or not we spend a session on that will depend on the demand on grabbing information and what clients are asking for. I hadn't originally planned that, but we can certainly take that as a one-off in that regard. If you're looking to grab information from the database natively, ShoreTel does require that you fill out basically it's a document that says we're giving you access, and you understand that as part of this access, if you blow it up, we're not able to help you with that. So I always say tread carefully. You can absolutely get the information, have access to it. Hopefully that answers your question in a roundabout way. There's a couple considerations to think about when getting access to the database. Any other
and Chris, I think that some of our other customers in the past, when they wanted access from ECC to a data warehouse, is they can use the CCIR database to kind of gain access without necessarily affecting the ECC database, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So the CCIR database, and there's something that would be probably of interest to you as well. ShoreTel does provide what's called a CCIR transform service. Now let me explain what that does. The CCIR transform service takes the incredibly complicated database structure that is ECC, puts it into a single unified table, and it's really more about call accounting. It's going to show you every single call that came into the system, who administered it, who handled it, what was the outcome of the call, but it's in a flat database structure. When clients are looking to grab information into their own data warehouse, the best first stop would be the CCIR, using the CCIR transform service, because it will pull everything into a single table for you, and that database schema is published. Now, if you want to take the next step, then that would be getting access to the raw table, which requires a form that you fill out with ShoreTel.
Okay. The next question is from Erwin. It says, when is training for scripting?
So we have an outline here. I think the next logical step will be our script. We're going to do these trainings once a month, and I have a sort of an agenda here. I'm going to give you a sense here that we're going to want to do scripting next month, which I'll go ahead and plan out. Because we've already dipped our toes into scripting here. We'll do that on our next session, which will be next month, so stay tuned for the date on that.
Okay, so maybe we ask Erwin, is there anything in particular you would like to see as far as in the scripting training then? Anything in particular that you're looking for? The next one is from Brendan. It says, if we have a medical system that doesn't use SQL, can we still use database inquiries and things, question mark, could something be custom built for our system?
Absolutely 100% yes. Now here's my experience with healthcare and medical facilities. The most critical piece, and this goes for banks as well, is security around data. So let me answer a really critical question and make a statement. I do not advocate that ECC have open access to your raw data. Most businesses live and breathe on their data. It is too critical. However, every client I've worked with usually exports their data to a staging table somewhere for analytics purposes. And it's that method that I recommend gaining access in a staging table. I don't think anyone would ever recommend getting into your database raw. However, I do recommend creating a staging table with only enough information that you might use to make strategic call handling or call routing decisions. And in healthcare, that could be as simple as just give us the demographic information. Are they Spanish speaker or not? Did they miss an appointment or do they have an appointment date? We actually don't need any other details. And yes, we can customize something specifically for you. It just depends on the nature of your environment. So each of those are handled as a one-off. But I will say 9 times out of 10, it does not require something custom from us to make it happen, because if you're not using SQL and you're using something else, usually along those lines, someone is dumping that or converting that information into something more readable. And I'm presuming that if you're in healthcare, healthcare is known for having a lot of mainframe applications that still use IBM, and in those cases, the data is still being dumped somewhere. So yes, we can do something custom. I'm not sure if it's 100% necessary at this point.
All right. Let's see here. From Barb, it says, is there a way for our customer support person on the phone to enter some data that then goes into the database? Example, call notes go into a flat file, but not the database.
So that's a really good question. So the short answer could be yes. Now here's the key. When we talk about call profiles, I want to add this to the table as well. While I'm talking about creating custom call profiles, I actually don't like the term custom because it's part of the system, but when you're creating manual call profiles that you want to give your own name, there are actually some call profiles that exist within the system already, such as the name of the caller, the time the caller called in. There are built-in call profiles. Now the trick with updating to an external resource, such as notes and things like that, it really depends on your application. We use call profiles, as I mentioned before, at the desktop level to do a screen pop. But we can also, the system is built with what are known as triggers, and the call profiles can be sent to a trigger, which could be an application to update notes so long as the call is still connected. So the triggers can happen at various stages. When I answer the call, when I hang up the call, when I enter the wrap code for the call, or if I put the call on hold. So we would have to look at your strategy in terms of what you're trying to accomplish and at what point we need that update to happen to ensure it can happen. Yes, it can happen. We would need to look at your environment to understand where the pieces are to make it happen, but yes, it can.
All right. Let's see, next one. Okay, Barb said thank you. So this is on Irvin. As far as the scripting, he says that regarding scripting, I need to export the database to a spreadsheet so we can extract and massage data.
Okay, you need to export what data? Is it the ECC data? Is that what we're talking about?
Yes.
So you need to extract it to an Excel spreadsheet and massage it in your BI application. Is that correct?
I would assume that's what he's referring to.
Okay, yeah, you know, I'm not sure that's the best way to go, quite honestly, because there's quite a bit of information that you're going to get from ECC if you're navigating the database directly. Here's what I'll say: if you're looking to extract maybe just the call activity for one person and massage it, that's one way to go. But when we're talking about the amounts of data that are generated in the contact center, even in just a single hour of operation, depending on how busy your environment is, that's a lot of data to export into Excel. While it can be done, I recommend actually pulling it into a secondary database table which you can push into your BI application or pull it directly into your BI app. But absolutely, you can do that. You'd have to set up a process to either extract it through a DTS on SQL or have a stored procedure that creates a flat file so that you can import it into Excel. There's really no limitation on that. The key is going to be, where is the data on ECC and how are we pushing it for you? Quite frankly, I'm not a fan of doing an extra ETL process, ETL being extract, transform, and load. one of the things that you can do, if you have the information replicated into another database, or if you're attaching a CCIR, you can extract directly into your BI app, so there wouldn't be a need to navigate it and massage it through Excel. But I would need to understand more about why you're looking to navigate and extract it in Excel first. I presume there's probably some other parameters that we haven't addressed yet. So if that's the case, maybe we can have a follow-up discussion regarding your specific needs.
Okay, yeah. And I'll send Erwin our contact information, Chris, so that he can get a hold of us for for follow-ups and stuff like that.
Yeah, that'd be great. I hesitate to give an emphatic answer because I don't know enough about your environment, and that's really critical because not the same answer doesn't suit everyone because everyone has a little slightly different environment.
Yep. All right. So the last question right now that we have is from Craig. It says, "Is setting up triggers in the IVR scripting training?"
So the trigger, I want to make sure we understand triggers. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was trying to see is setting up triggers in the IVR scripting. Maybe so maybe that's is setting up triggers in the IVR. Is that part of the scripting training that that we're considering for next month?
So the trigger that I mentioned a moment ago, that actually is at the desktop level. So that'll be a different session. Triggers happen external to IVR. However, I want to make sure that we're not talking about an overlap here. Inside ECC, you can do logic switching, which is this icon I just highlighted here. Logic switching, I suppose you could look at it as a trigger. In other words, if the balance is over this, do that. If not, do this. Or if the customer speaks Spanish, do this. And if not, do this. That could be considered trigger. I just want to make sure we're talking about two separate things here. The triggers I mentioned about the notes of the question that was asked a moment ago is actually part of another session that we're going to do, which is configuring the screen pops and configuring application communication.
And Craig said that he meant triggers the way you mentioned earlier.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just wanted to clear it up. Okay, sure. That will be actually in a separate session. It won't be part of IVR. IVR in and of itself will take an isolated session. And actually screen pops and how we push information to applications will be a separate isolated session. So that will probably be after IVR. I'm still formulating the plan based on what clients are requesting, but I'm just going to make a note here for desktop applications and triggers because that's one thing we'll cover separate of IVR.
So yeah, so Craig, look forward to a training specifically on triggers and screen pops and in client side capabilities of the ECC.
So are there any more questions, Chris? If not, I have one more comment to make.
Nope, that was all the questions, so you can wrap it up.
All right, so let me make a final comment. One of the things that I always look for in an application is how flexible can I be? Now we're talking about ECC and connecting to a database. What I want to be very clear about is that once you're connected to a database, you open up your options exponentially. So for the guys out that are on the call that are familiar with SQL or Oracle and stored procedures, it's very, especially the guys that have BI applications, business analytics applications, it's very common that you have lots of very deep and robust processes and analytics that happen. I do not recommend rebuilding those in ECC because, from a very simplistic point of view, ECC can simply launch the stored procedure. Your BI app can do all sorts of protracted analyses and come back with a result. All we care about is the result. So because I can get to your database connection, that opens up substantially what you can do with a call and what you can do with the system. Having that flexibility completely changes the game and how you envision IVR. And most systems, IVR is a completely separate process which requires professional services, and that's why I like ECC because of its flexibility. And here at Inflow, we've worked with many clients that have very specific needs, especially marketing and lead generation, that are very deep and wide. We would love to talk to you about your opportunities and what you're trying to accomplish to help you leverage ECC to its maximum potential. And with that said, Chris, I'll turn it back to you.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to to let us know. As part of the registration, you've got an email address for Susan Vargo, and she could pass on any questions that, to the appropriate people within Inflow, so we can get those questions answered for you. And we look forward to you joining in the future. Thank you.